I would like to call the meeting to order of School Board, Stillwater Area Public School District, 8:34. And this is our business meeting, and the date is December 12th. Secretary, please read the roll.
Chair Potachik.
Here.
Vice Chair Pearson.
Here.
Treasurer Weisberg.
Here.
Clerk Stivland.
Here.
Director Burns.
Here.
Director Pelletier.
Here.
Director Riley.
Here.
You have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
District mission statement.
That would be me.
Sarah.
The mission of Stillwater Area Public Schools, in partnership with students, family, and community, is to develop curious individuals who are active and engaged leaders in an ever-changing world by challenging all students as they travel along their personalized learning pathways.
Okay, and school board goals.
In partnership with community, parents, and students, the School Board of Stillwater Area Public Schools ensures excellence in education by increasing student achievement for all students, securing long-term financial stability of the district, increasing community trust and engagement.
Thank you both. Before we approve or ask for a motion to approve tonight's agenda, I'm going to state that our goal is 2 hours or less. And what we will do is this: if we're not done in 2 hours, we will consider not doing items 12, which is the board member reports. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying you can't speak. We have 5 speakers lined up for open forum, so I think it's a worthy goal, and collectively we can try to do that. So with that seasonal kind word, let's go to the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Sarah moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And Tina second. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand, please.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Superintendent report.
All right, thank you. This evening I have a few exciting things to share with you. Our marketing department has been working very closely with our preschool teachers and are going to be sending out over 900 flyers to our 3- and 4-year-olds this week. And there's a document that school board members all got these materials in their folders, but there's a document, preschool, everything you need to know. Of course, Pony Pride stickers, which are a big favorite for our kids and families. And then there's a preschool open house that I want to make sure that our community is aware of on Wednesday, January 15th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Additional information is on our website, but our preschool program has been very successful within the district, and we want to just make sure that everybody is aware of that so they can access that open house if they'd like to and be ready to sign up for preschool. I also attended the St. Croix Retired Educators Luncheon this week and got the great treat of listening to our Vagabonds, which is one of our musical groups. Angela Mitchell, who is the director, shared that she has over 20 visits within the next 3 weeks with that group of students. And so they're making the rounds in our community, sharing some music at this time of year, which is really a joy to watch. I also had the opportunity to go to Noon Rotary today with Principal Fields from Oakland Middle School, and we presented in partnership with the Stillwater Area Community Foundation. Some of you might be aware that Principal Fields is helping to pilot a career exploration program at Oakland on January 22nd and 23rd. And we're having several people within the community, organizations, businesses come and share some of the professions that they are involved in and how they can help students be aware of career exploration outside of what their families might be aware of. It also will help our students understand a broad range of career options available to them. So we really appreciate the local professionals and organizations who are helping support this on January 22nd and 23rd. And some of you as a board might be presenting and some people in the audience this evening. Thank you for that. And then finally, I just wanted to share, and I won't say too much because hopefully if we get to the community engagement group, our directors will, but we just had an exciting opportunity this morning to partner with our seniors throughout the district, and it's something that our community engagement working group directors have been really eager to do, and they just did an amazing job today that hopefully they'll be able to share more with you about in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to student report.
All right, so for our academic report, yesterday we had our mock e-learning day at school. So it was like a mock trial of what students would do if there was a snow day. And so everything was online, all the assignments, and students used devices to access the assignments. Kulik and I and most students brought their own devices from home, and everything went smoothly. For the activities and athletics, Student Council has been selling serenades at lunch. And they will be performed next week, Wednesday. Yesterday, we actually brought in speakers during lunch to play holiday music to boost sales. So that's been going really well, and we're excited for that. And then NHS had a blood drive at the school on Tuesday, and they will also be putting on the Winter Coffee House performances next Friday, the 20th.
To add on to that report, last weekend the debaters went to state and were very successful. We got a lot of novices going to the final rounds, and for those who don't know, like the lingo, novices are basically first-year debaters, and that's going to be a lot of freshmen, and we had some juniors in there too. Winter concerts are occurring right now, and there are still maybe some tickets on sale, but they go by really fast. So if you haven't gotten one yet, go ahead and go grab them now. Just this Wednesday, there was a unity dance during flex time, so a lot of students were able to go to that, and also our students with disabilities were there too. The theater department is putting on their spring play and had the informational meeting just a couple days ago, and they're putting on the Beauty and the Beast, and as we talk right now, they're probably still at the building working on it because they're always there. And then Tuesday was Human Rights Day, and Amnesty International, a club at our school, put on like a little booth in our main rotunda, and they had petitions for students to sign. And they also had speakers come in during that day too. And so it was an exciting day for all of us. And that's our report.
Thank you. Thank you both. Next, we have open forum, and I'm going to read the second part. The first part I usually read, but I'm going to hold off because I'm trying to meet that 2-hour max. Stillwater Area School District welcomes input from citizens as community involvement fosters better decision-making and improved learning experiences for all students. While comments and questions are welcome during open forum, law prohibits the board from discussing concerns about individual employees or students in a public meeting. We'll stop the proceedings immediately if employee or student privacy issues are raised and direct the speaker to forward comments regarding individual employees or students to the superintendent. Because we are modeling civil discourse for our community, speakers must present their testimony in a respectful manner. Vulgarity, character attacks, malice, or specific complaints identifying staff or students by name or implication will not be permitted. The board will not deliberate, discuss, or engage in conversation with the speakers during open forum. However, the board may ask administration to review the concerns presented. And so having said that, this first name is the last part is a little bit light. I think it's Joel, right? And Joel, if you come forward, please. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Joel Bryan, band teacher at Stillwater Area High School, Brookview Elementary, Afton Lakeland, and Anderson. And I'm here to talk about the Brookview expansion. It's time. Brookview is packed. We need the extra space. In the 3 years that the school has been open, the band facility has changed each year. And it has changed for the orchestra staff as well. The current setup is I'm in a intervention room, which is barely big enough to fit my largest lesson group. And while we are in there, the neighboring room, which is a preschool classroom, is bombarded with noise to the point where they are doing a free choice time, and instructional time is not possible at that same time. When I arrive at Brookview, I need to get there at roughly 10 to 20 minutes ahead of time just to make sure the setup is in place, both getting the room set up, but then also walking across the school and actually walking into a second grade classroom, because that second grade classroom has my storage space. I go in there, get my equipment out, hopefully without distracting too many second graders, and then haul it back across the school to get started that way. My colleague Cassandra Harold in the orchestra room is running into some similar issues with her space, which is a conference room in the main office, where she is limited to the amount of prep she's able to do after school because of meetings that naturally need to happen in conference rooms and offices afterwards. And so we're both running into facility frustrations that way. Beyond that, we have a really nice facility for where it started, but we know that there's going to be more growth and continued growth there. And we need to build for the students so we are set and we can educate them in the next decade and the next couple decades there. So.
Thank you. Our second speaker is Kelly Feldkamp.
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Pontrelli. My name's Kelly Feldkamp, and I have been teaching kindergarten in our district for 9 years now. I'm also a mom to 3-year-old Millie and 5-month-old Ruby, who will be hopefully 2 future Stillwater ponies. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the educators at Brookview Elementary, a group of teachers and support staff that have come together from every elementary building in our district, including the 3 schools that were closed. Although each of us experienced mixed emotions leaving behind our previous school families, we believed that Brookview was a place to move forward and to serve a new community of learners. We have come together from our wide range of backgrounds to provide excellent learning opportunities for our students. Tonight, we're calling on you as a board to come together as well, to help our community unite behind the cause of providing the best experience for all of our Stillwater students, whether they go to school in the northern or the southern half of our district. Voting to expand Brookview will only start to help provide equity and opportunity to our students in the south. Underfunding and overcrowding in the southern end of our district has been an ongoing problem, and it's now reached a boiling point. Our southern schools are unique because they house learners from very diverse backgrounds, some of our most vulnerable learners, families new to the country, and a large portion of our special education population. In addition, there's a thriving early childhood population here, with many young families, like my own, who have children just embarking on their education in Stillwater schools. Instead of fostering this growth, though, we are grossly limiting how many families enroll in our preschool programs because of our space issues. All of these families and children deserve the best facilities possible. They don't deserve to learn in crowded spaces, areas unfit for learning, such as our current preschool classrooms at Brookview, or in the case of Lake Elmo Elementary, out-of-date spaces. All of our Stillwater students deserve adequate spaces for media, art, music, special education, and English language classes. We want Stillwater area schools to move together for the benefit of all of our students. We deeply care about the families we work for. When people know better, they can do better. You know that our district principals support the expansion of Brookview from their March 6th letter to you. You now know that the educators at Brookview fully support this expansion. You know there's sustained growth in Woodbury and Lake Elmo. You know that Brookview and Lake Elmo are overcrowded and we need an immediate solution. And you now have the opportunity to do better for our students. Please, please do better for all of our Stillwater students by voting to expand Brookview Elementary on December 19th. Thank you.
Thank you. You must be Mary.
I am Mary. How'd you guess?
And Mary, how do you pronounce your last name?
Moina, the GH is silent.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Please begin.
Okay, hello board members, and again, my name is Mary Moina, and I'm a first grade teacher at Brookview Elementary School. I'm here on behalf of the preschool program staff to bring understanding to how the preschool program at Brookview has been negatively impacted by the shortage of space in our school. In the voter-approved bond of 2015, having preschool classrooms in our elementary schools was a key component. Much of the positives of this inclusion in the plan have been actualized. The district is retaining over 80% of those enrolled in the district preschool programs, and those enrolled are having a smooth and successful transition into kindergarten. Preschool classrooms in our elementary schools have become so popular with parents in our district that spots are snatched up within minutes after enrollment begins, leaving a long waiting list. Like with any business, pent-up demand requires action on the supply side. Despite the challenges, this is a good problem for our district to have. The challenge is that with larger than expected growth in enrollment of K-5 students at Brookview, the 2 classrooms that were initially designed for our preschoolers are now being used by the K-1 classes. Currently, both preschool classes are held in areas that were not intended to be used as regular classrooms, but rather smaller group areas. These areas are much smaller than the state recommended and are not developmentally appropriate for our preschool program. One room is L-shaped, making it impossible for teachers to see students in all areas of the room. Neither room has a bathroom, so the students are escorted to bathrooms designated for our oldest students in the building. The smaller spaces not only necessitate lower student numbers, but made Brookview difficult to accommodate preschoolers with special needs. These are just a few of the challenges faced by our preschool program due to our space deficiencies at Brookview. More and more families are beginning their school experience with preschool in our district. Shouldn't we be providing them with a quality learning environment and experience so that they want to stay in our district and not search for other outside options? A funding mechanism is available to add to the building. It has been known before the building opened, and there is a need for expansion. It supports the capture of the students and keep them in the district. It does not impact taxes. The expansion is one step forward to supporting the growth and the need for a space for our children. Thank you.
And our final speaker is Vivian. Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica Rudolph. And then we have one more after that, Vivian.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Rudolph. I live in Woodbury, kids at Brookview. I'm here tonight to support the funding of the COP for the Brookview expansion. I'm going to skip some of this because I just covered the problems, obviously, at Brookview. So I just wanted to say, with my tax statement I just received, looking at a $200 decrease, that's great. But that's clearly because we have grown so much in the district, in that portion of the district. So I really feel like we need to invest in some classroom space. 8 classrooms to help out this growing community would go a long way, and it is 8 classrooms. I know there was some confusion about that at a previous meeting. It's also, to me, a no-brainer because you're looking at about the price of a cup of coffee at Starbucks to do this for our children. Previously, we've heard from some of you that did not want to move forward with the expansion that you wanted to hear from the community design team. Well, I think the design team has now said with early results there that there is a need. There is a need there. And I'm wondering if you're going to ignore that recommendation, why did we waste $85,000 of our strapped budget to just, and so many precious community members' hours that they've devoted for this as well. Also, you know, if there's concerns about future levies, I don't think anyone thinks that this is the end game down in Woodbury. We know there's going to be more across the district, a lot of areas that need to be improved both north to south. Woodbury's turned out in the past to support levies. I think that is apparent in a lot of history there. And even after they've received a school, and they still supported future levies. So please keep all that in mind and come together and keep the kids in mind. They're the ones that are being packed in there and being affected by it. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Vivian?
I'm Vivian Vadova. I live in West Lakeland. My kids previously attended Lake Elmo Elementary and Oakland, and I have one high school student who's a junior right now. When I look at the data of how many houses are being built and how many kids there are and how many kids are in each school, it is obvious that we need to approve a non-voter levy to expand Brookview, and it needs to be done immediately, okay? Failure to do this is failing your fiduciary responsibility to the entire school district, and it's holding hostage hundreds of children's educations in what seems to be a quest to reopen 2 less used facilities, and in the continuation of a petty war with the superintendent who was part of the planning process that caused the closure of those 2 schools. Now, in the time I've been in this district, I've been part of, you know, in areas that they're gonna change lines for different schools, and I know it's disappointing. But you have to look at reality and what's best for the whole district and for the kids in the district. I've heard several arguments against the non-voter levy, and they're misleading, they're false, and they show an alternative agenda. So here's like 4 of the arguments I've heard. We have to wait for the CDT recommendation. This is a delay tactic, okay? The early CDT recommendations are for an immediate expansion, and if you wait for the complete report, then the expansion won't happen till at least 2023. And we don't have that time. We have too many kids in the schools right now. The second is expansion is not enough. Therefore, we should do nothing until the levy, until we have a voter-approved levy. Of course, it's not enough, but it will reduce the pressure on the southern schools to add classrooms in Brookview. It'll allow Lake Elmo to get less crowded. It'll allow Lakeland to get less crowded, and it's needed. And then it'll give us that time before that next voter-approved levy. And then if Brookview parents get this, they won't vote for another levy. Well, this is also misleading and false because where are those kids gonna go? They're gonna go to Oakland after they go to Brookview, and Oakland is under, it has too many kids in it as well. So that's a problem. So another falsehood is the resistance to non-voter approved levies, okay? The fact is, it's so obvious that this has to happen that making it have to wait for a voter approved levy and making a big deal of it is just wasting everybody's time. It adds to like voter fatigue, and you just need to actually do things that make sense when you're on the school board. When you were elected, I talked to every candidate, and every candidate told me they cared more about the kids and what made sense for the whole district than their own personal, you know, little things that they wanted. And you lied, okay? I've seen that you lied, and I'm really disappointed. You need to approve this levy, and it's not rocket science.
Okay,
You need to do what's
Vivian,
right
you're
for
gonna have
the
to end there,
kids.
please. Thank you. Next is the consent agenda, and there's a list A through J here. And could I get a motion, and then I'll read the list?
Yep, Chair, I'm going to pull item C.
Okay. Any other?
Could I'd like to just pull the item B just for a very quick comment.
Okay, any others? Seeing none, then this is my list. Minutes of the November 21st, 2019 business meeting. Program and course changes is D. E is the approval of increase to non-teacher district subrates. F is leave agreement with employee. G is expenditure approval. Chiller, number 3, internal inspection and overall. And I think that's at the high school. Expenditure approval, Rutherford Kindergarten FTE. And then it looks like we have 2 field trips. And one of those is for 5 coaches, 4 chaperones, and the boys' baseball team to travel to Florida on March 25th through the 30th to play baseball for team bonding and better weather conditions and facilities. I'm sure there's a few volunteers out there in the audience tonight. Field trip for, second field trip is for 1 director, 5 chaperones, and 48 students to travel to Omaha on April 16th through 19th, 2020 for the annual spring choir tour. So could I get a motion for items A, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J? Shelley moved, and
Second.
I'll take Liz. I saw her hand first. There's been a motion and a second for those consent items. All of those in approval, please signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
And I believe they pass unanimously. Now, I'm just going to go in alphabetical order, Jen, so I'll take, Mark, you had a comment you wanted to make or a question?
Yeah, it is a comment. So I see on the list here that we have the retirement of Miss Sarah Damon, who has been in the district now for over 22 years. My daughter had the pleasure of having her as a teacher for just a semester before she took her leave of absence, but it was one of her favorite semesters that she had. So I just want to say congratulations to Ms. Damon on a great career.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll take a look at item C.
Yep.
Should we take a vote
Or
on
should
that?
we pass it separate? Okay, we'll do that then. Mark, you moved?
Yep, I'll move to.
In a second, Jen? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand, please.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. And Jen, you have the floor for item C.
All right, thank you, Chair. So I pulled the disbursements a couple meetings ago with regards to the legal fees, and I've since been looking at them in a little bit more detail, itemized and whatnot. And I have to just come clean that I went to the Gopher football game and I got sick and my eyeballs are crossing and I've looked at these numbers. So it's going to be on you, Kristen, to help me through the numbers a little bit because I'm going to get it wrong. But
Can you tell us
in
what
our
pages those
disbursement,
are
yeah,
on?
page 17 of disbursements. And in the disbursements, could you, Kristen, help me just make sure I've got this right, that it's 10K, the recent disbursement for board legal expenses is 10K, give or take. Is that accurate?
When I'm looking at page 17 of the disbursement register, specifically under Kennedy and Graven, there's various components that are broken down, but if you look at the coding to the far right, you will see a code that is 01E 005 010. The 010 indicates that is board expense. And so when you look at the items that are 010, you have legal services through September, which is $2,589. And they're all in the same check to Kennedy and Graven, but they're listed individually. There is legal services superintendent eval through October of $38.70. There is invoices, and there's numbers, 151751, 151752, 151557, and 151571 legal services. That is in the amount of $6,565.50. Those would be the three, the 2589, the 3870, and the 6565 that have gone to the board code for this disbursement register.
Okay, so adding that up, it's give or take. So just to recap from last year, we were at about $6,500 for board-related legal expenses in 2018, and this gets us from January through October. And is that around, did I do this right, around $30,000?
$36,214.
$36,214, okay. From this year, 2019, January through October. Okay, thank you. And then, Chair, I just, in looking at this, I guess I have to ask, there are multiple, as I pulled these itemized to kind of look at it and try to delve in a little bit deeper, there are multiple bills that went directly to your home address. I've got $3,600 in May, over $6,400 in June, $3,400 all going to your personal address, and then I've got even a couple more than that. And I'm just wondering,
Yeah. The reason they come directly to me is I sign off and then I deliver those to Kristen's office.
Is that policy? Have we ever operated like that before? I don't recall that. And then most of them have, they say superintendent evaluation on them, and then one of them says audit. So I'm wondering why? Why are they going to your home?
Yeah, and like I said, because then I'm aware that those were still pending and I have to sign them, and then I deliver them as soon as I get them to Kristen's office.
So you sign every single bill? Why?
I sign those that come specifically to the board. There are other Kenny and Graven that I don't see and don't sign.
So is that a new policy? I don't know who to ask this question to, maybe Kathy. I mean, is that a new policy? I don't recall having anything sent to my home address as a board chair, legal fees. So I don't really know who to ask this to. This was new to me and disturbing. So I'm just concerned. I don't know even. Do we have a policy?
I apologize, Jen. I don't have information about where the bills are being sent or why they're being sent where they are.
Okay.
I haven't been part of conversations.
Okay. I guess for me, I would, given this massive dollar amount that we are seeing this year, upwards of, over 4 times the amount, and then this other nuance, Chair, I would like to know, I would like a formal response from our attorney as to, I don't even know, some of this says attorney-client privilege on it that you wrote, but
I didn't write that.
it does say your name on it, but it says attorney-client privilege, and then your name is on it, signed, your name is signed, Chair.
Sure.
And I guess for me, I'm one of 7, and I feel that I have the right to know what that's about at the time. And I personally would like to see, at the time this is going on, as one of 7 board members, the courtesy of knowing what on earth is going on. So I would like to move to table this item. I don't feel comfortable with it until we have, I actually would like a formal response of some sort from the attorney as to what this is. I just don't feel comfortable.
If I may respond, anytime, and because you've done it on a number of occasions, you've called our attorney directly. In fact, the last time you raised this issue at the board, I thought your message to me and others was, this is expensive. So I held back, except when the need came up that I had to do it again. And the first thing I was told is you had called the following Friday morning and left a message. Every time the attorney gets a call from a board member, there is clock time on that. And I think you know that, and you've done several.
Actually, no. They are in here, and they're stated as to board member conference calls with you and 2 other board members. I've got one day that's like a $1,600 day. I wasn't a part of that day, so I would beg to differ. I've made a couple calls, and I asked her, I said, I'm on the clock, so it was $75, and I asked her if I could actually pay it myself. So and the reason, I just would like to state, the reason I've done that is because we've had such a system of not knowing what's going on, that I call the attorney to ask the attorney what she's telling the board. And that has been at play the entire year from my perspective. So I would like to see this dramatically change. So I do want to move to table this item.
Well, we've got a couple other questions.
I guess I would just like to say, I mean, I've had to call the attorney. I've been accused of a few things from community members, and you tried to stop me from receiving superintendent's reviews when I was doing that. So that was another time I needed to get an opinion. But I always confer with the board chair if I have a question, so I'm not sure why it would be necessary to call an attorney for information when you have access to the board chair.
Okay. Shelley?
Well, I just have a procedural question because I don't know that we can actually table
A disbursement.
disbursements because it's already done.
Well, what you can do, the option is to remove the services happen. You remove that one check and you approve the rest of the disbursements with withholding that payment. That you can do.
But it's
Would be
up to-
withholding
it's
the
up to the
payment of
board's
that
vote.
check.
Take a vote. Yeah, that does have to take a vote.
It would be subject to a vote.
Yep.
Shelley?
So would it be better because the services have already been rendered to pass it and then move to have the further discussion about how we do legal? Because we owe the money, so I don't.
Yeah,
think
I
we
mean,
can-
Shelley, you can do that, and I'm not going to vote in the affirmative of that, but.
Yeah. And Jen, for the record, I do follow up, and any board member who talks to the board, Molly, or rather Maggie, makes me aware of that. She never made a comment that you offered to pay, but I will double check that.
This really is not about me. I just find this really comical. We're sitting at $30,000 of legal fees. So let's keep the thing the thing. Let's keep the issue the issue.
I want to respectfully acknowledge that you've raised a valid point. And I think if I understand what you're concerned about is that there are expenses relating to the legal fees and there's information relating to that you feel you have not received. So is that correct? You would like to have more information about what that is?
When I look through this, I mean, 2019 is this large. I look through this set of papers and I see conference calls with a chair and two other board members.
Okay, well, can we just
Those are the
acknowledge
kinds of things that we need to have the follow-up on.
Yes,
the courtesy and respect as board members.
So-
And I just find this utterly appalling.
So your answer is yes, you would like more information?
Oh, much more.
Okay, so that's
Much more.
that's helpful.
And I would like a follow-up on bills sent to a chair's home as well.
That seems like a valid question as well. If you'd
Thank
like
you.
to have some clarification on the procedures of how those bills are getting paid, that seems fair. But it seems like if there are any other further questions, it would be really great if you would take that up with the chair directly and maybe not at the board table.
Well, my only opportunity is at the board table, so that's where it's going to be.
Well, I disagree with that.
I disagree as well.
Okay. I just want, I would like to acknowledge that you've made some valid points that would need to be considered, but I would like to move that we move on.
Okay.
Is there a way, I mean, I think to Shelley's point to, can we just agree to pay the invoices that we have and somehow make sure that there is the discussion that has been requested? I think that's, I think that's the point. And I guess procedurally, if that means, having a motion to pull that out and just that one, or, looking for advice, but it just would be, if that one question can be addressed, and then we
The one
move on.
question being?
Well, I believe if it might be more than one question, but the question that I heard is the route through which the bills are being done now. I think that was the questions that's different than what has been done in the past. Just an explanation. And so I don't know if the best way then is to pass all of it or withhold that one bill so that we have that conversation. I don't know what the best is, but.
It seems to me that a conversation can take place and we can pay the bill at the same time. I mean, these are expenses that have already been incurred. We need to pay the bills.
Can we vote?
I'm open for a motion.
Well, I think there is a motion out, I believe, right? Did you propose a motion?
So I had initially moved a table, so I can amend my motion to Shelley's, so I can take the motion table off and I can just amend it for me. I mean, I'm okay, I'm at peace with the fact if it doesn't pass, but to the comment that you made, Shelley, where we pay the fees that are not the board related fees, we pass that in disbursement and withhold the second until we have some formal information back from our attorney that the entire board gets at the exact same time.
So is that two motions or one?
It can be whatever people want. So I guess it would be, my motion is going to be that we pass the disbursements for the legal fees, except for the board-related legal fees, until we get that information.
Okay.
Do we need a second?
Is there a second?
I'll
Mark, second.
Can I say?
Shelley?
So I just want to be clear that I think that we need to have the conversation. I'm not comfortable withholding money from our legal counsel because the services have been rendered. I'm not comfortable. So for that reason, I'm not going to vote for it, but I am in favor of having a conversation about it.
Okay.
I agree. I mean, I feel like that's the same reason that I have a problem with people saying you approved it because you approved disbursements. Disbursement is a bill we owe. It already happened.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
No, I'm at peace. I'm honestly at peace with that. I'm very concerned about what I've seen in these papers this year. So I'm at peace with it.
We have a motion before us then to withhold the disbursements that have to do with board and legal fees. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, and we have a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. Motion does not pass. Is there another motion?
I'd like to move that we approve the disbursements as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify, or any discussion? Anybody want to say anything else? All those in favor of the present motion to pay those legal fees signify by saying aye and raising your right hand.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? So motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Can I apologize. I meant to vote nay. I'm sorry. Can I quick retract that before it goes into the minutes? Sorry, Mike. I'm a nay vote.
Okay.
That's
I
fine.
accept
Thank you.
that.
Thank you.
Can I just?
Shelley?
And then as follow-up, can we just put it on our agenda for our board chair superintendent meeting to have further discussion about how to bring that forward?
Thank you.
I don't know if we can have it for this Wednesday, but we will put it on the agenda. Okay. Moving on, we are on to reports in taxation. And Kristen, that's yours.
Good evening, Board Chair Potocnik, Superintendent Pontrelli, school board members. Tonight, we will be having the Truth in Taxation 2019 Levy Payable 2020 presentation. I would like to point out that there are some official requirements by statute that we need to discuss during this presentation. One is our school district budget. The other is the levy. And then third, and finally, it needs to be open up for public comment. It does not need to be a discussion, but it needs to be available for public comment, just so you understand the protocol of what needs to happen during this meeting. We're going to move into the school district 2019-2020 school district, our current year budget. This budget is based off of the preliminary budget. It's always so very challenging because inevitably it seems like when I'm doing this presentation, the revised budget is usually at the table at some point, but because we don't have a formal adoption of a revised budget yet, we need to defer back to our preliminary budget. The information that is before you on the first slide, and again, this presentation is always a little bit more challenging just given the sheer volume of numbers, is the first slide as it relates to revenues. You can see that the general fund is broken down into categories, whether it be levy, state aid, federal dollars, grants, other local revenue, extra and co-curricular fees, and then student activities and donations. The first column indicates what our actual 2018-2019 audited numbers came in at, and then what our preliminary budget reflects. And you can see the percent of total. One thing I'd like to point out is there is a difference between the actual dollar amount for grants that existed at the end of last year in revenue. In our preliminary budget, we never take into account grants because typically when a grant comes in, it's neutral. Whatever we take in, we expend, and that gets adjusted and reflected in the revised budget. It should not impact our bottom line. We just add it in when we have more information. And then you can see food service, community ed, building construction. Again, nothing was in the preliminary revenue budget for building construction because we had received all of our proceeds. In 2018-19, you can see that it was, that's our interest earnings. And then debt service and trust and agency fund and our total revenues. On to the expenditure side, this gets broken down by program. So you have administration, support services, and regular instruction and vocational instruction, special education, community service, and all of the different categories as we move forward. And then what the expenditures are for food service, community service, building, construction, what have you. So I'll move quickly through that. We have better visuals. I like this slide. You know, it all depends on, do you like to see the numbers or do you like to see the percentage? This graph breaks it down visually so you can compartmentalize and say revenue by source. How much of that, how much do we really receive per state aid? You can see that we're at about 68.5% of our money comes from state aid. And then what we're talking about tonight, 26.1% of our levy comes from our local taxpayers, and then how the rest fits into the pie. On the other side, how much of our overall budget are we spending in our particular categories? Special education, you can see, is between 17 and 18%, regular instruction, 42%, and how the numbers play out accordingly. Yeah.
The previous slide.
Sure.
Just one, and I have very few questions on here. One more back,
One more back.
please. And if you look at this, and I'm on page 40, I think that's what's up there.
One more back.
One more
One more?
back. But the question I have, and you probably know that off the top of your head, is if you go down from levy, state aid, federal grants, the grants in 2018-19, there was $263,000 grant.
That's multiple grants. That's the
okay.
combination of all of the grants that we were given in the district.
And did that go away because it got like down 100% or something?
No, we just don't include it in the preliminary.
Gotcha.
Because, for example, if someone were to grant us $10,000 to do a project, we'll spend the $10,000. We don't hypothesize on what our district average is going to be. Usually by the time when we're into fall in October working on the revised, we have a pretty good idea of what's going to be coming through the door as far as grant supporting. And then we'll see it on the backside in expenditures as well.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to, and again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the budget just because we have a refreshed version, just wanting to make sure that we hit the legal component of this hearing. Authority for school levies, it's either set by state formula or it's voter approved. This particular slide, our referendum market value, what this is our district's overall market value, less seasonal rec property and less ag land. So it excludes seasonal rec and ag land out of the market value component. As we work our way through this presentation, you will see essentially mainly our referendum money is based off of the referendum market value formula. We'll switch over, it depends on the category, it's either referendum market or it's net tax capacity. This is how it is distributed over referendum market value. Again, it's seasonal rec is removed and ag land is removed. And you can see the growth. This past year, from 18 for pay 19 into the estimate for 19 pay 20, we're at over $9 million. Whereas in the year prior, we were at $5.5 million. So that, you can see the growth in this slide. And again, the other formula that impacts our taxes is net tax capacity. And so this is our taxable market value, so it's everybody times the class rate. So like a house, if you happen to own a house that's $300,000, $400,000, your class rate is 1. So it's kind of like a weighted system with students. If you have property that's over $500,000, your class rate is 1.25. So there's like a sliding scale depending on the type of land, whether it's residential, higher end residential, commercial, industrial, that has different rates that they get assessed to create the next net tax capacity. And again, you can see this number is actually just shy, the difference between the prior year and what we're estimating for this payable is just shy of $10 million. So again, why our levy, the proposed levy looks the way it does is we have significant growth in these two categories.
Can you just explain, I know the difference between the referendum market value and the net tax capacity, but when you say that there's that much difference between the two in 1 year, can you just describe, like, what does that say about our community? Is that a lot of businesses happening, or is that mostly houses? Or, I mean, we all see that there's growth, but like,
and I actually
is there a way to describe it?
There is, and I'm trying to go back to the September presentation that I gave because I actually described it, I think, there. It's growth. It's obvious growth. There is a component of new construction.
Okay.
There is a component of just sheer like people adding on to their home or doing improvements and doing different things like there's components of that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to understand is why is the net tax capacity so much more than the referendum market value? I would think that they might be similar in terms of the total amount that they've grown in 1 year.
Well,
and if that's too complicated, then just
no,
forget
no,
it.
it's not. So it's actually if I break it down this way. So remember that, and honestly, the ag land really isn't huge for us, like the subtraction of ag land, because there just isn't a big difference. So there's ag land and seasonal rec. That's at least the first part of the formula that changes. Again, not a big difference. What happens is the class rate. So as soon as you have kind of how I said, if you have industrial, that's not a 1.0. That's it's a higher percentage. If you have homes going in over 500,000, that's not a 1.0. That's a higher percentage. Okay. So the referendum market value is just the market value. Mm-hmm. The net tax capacity is the taxable market value times the class rate. Okay. So if everything was a $500,000 or less residential home, they'd be very similar.
Okay. Okay.
That's why they're not.
That's what I thought. Okay. Thank you. Thank
you
for that.
Kristen, along those lines, and putting up the large for assisted living, that's a different category as well?
Yes, and I honestly I would have to research where that fits in, but even like apartmental units, if there's houses more than 4, I mean, anytime you have large structures like that, it's a different rate than just a pure house.
Because I'm saying, I'm aware of some that were huge that went in, and I'm sure the housing growth probably, as many of our open forum speakers said, is occurring in the South. But there are some of those big institutions that are being built in the North as well.
And when it takes at times the class rate, I think it's the system trying to make it fair, kind of to those with either income coming in or higher level where they're able to have more to make the distribution of the property tax more fair to them. Because it's the class rate system and how it's getting divided. So.
And can you remind me which one of these is impacted? Is it a bond that is not impacted by, which one of these two groups doesn't? I know they pay differently, right? I mean, I'm not asking the
So
question.
your operating referendum
Yes.
is based off of the referendum market value.
Thank you.
And that is absent seasonal rec and ag.
So when we're looking at a bond and we see this much growth in the net tax capacity, that's good.
And then the bond, our debt service, is net tax capacity.
Okay.
So it really is the question that you're going out for that is going to be one category versus the other. That's why when we've talked before, as you guys have started to review what the future election looks like, the tax impact doesn't translate. You can't say $1 million in an operating referendum is the same impact as $1 million on debt because it's two different categories that the multiplier is by.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other areas you want to highlight?
I'm good. We'll just move on to quickly the general fund levies. And again, this is usually the hardest page to see. The one thing that I just want to point out to you, the only number that has changed is at the very, close to the very bottom and to, let me see if, ooh, that didn't work. I was trying to work the pointer. It doesn't work. Right above, on the right-hand side, right above the line, you'll see a number of 1,779,349. That is the only number that has changed on this slide from when you saw the presentation on September 26th. It is reflective of the ad of the COP, and it's $477,000 per annum. And so, just so you're aware, depending on how the board moves forward in any category, quite honestly, the numbers can get adjusted, but I wanted to highlight that is the one difference then from the slide that we had looked at back in September. Otherwise, all of these numbers are the same, and so I'll just open it up to say, do you have any questions in particular about this slide?
Okay, good. Questions? And I'm not begging for those in the interest of time. You want to go to the next?
I sure will. The community services levy, as you can see, is all based off of net tax capacity. Again, not a change in number here from September 26th. And then debt service levies, the net tax capacity, again, no changes since September 26th. And then our totals, again, the only line that changed was the general fund and the increase of the $477,000 for the placeholder of the COP. This slide just, again, presents a visual. What has our history been, both in dollar amount and in what categories have we looked at? Just realize that as we move to the end of the graph, when you look at debt service and OPEB debt service, debt service, that was our trust, that's dropped off. We backfilled debt service. That the debt was structured that way. So overall impact doesn't vary much. It's just you switch categories. And you can see that at least our preliminary proposed levy right now is approximately $1.1 million less than it was a year ago. This slide, this is district comparison for taxes payable in 19. So that is the 1920 school year. So this is last year's information. It's not going to reflect anything that happened at the polls in November. The way I explain this slide is this isn't the revenue we collect. This is what the taxpayer experiences. So if I have a $300,000 residential property in Stillwater area schools, my school portion of property tax is going to be $1,115. If I picked my house up and I moved it over to South Wash, I am going to pay $2,059.73. That's their school portion. So you can see we were second to last. I want to say when I did this slide a year ago, we are now, on our 10 comparisons, we are now the lowest for what our taxpayers feel as school experience.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick. Thank you for that. I think last time I started looking up, most of these districts, if not all, have passed an operating levy since we have, which is a portion of that. And I think, just to be clear, I think some have used this as assuming that our taxpayers don't support our schools, but that's not what this is saying either. This is just the portion that
what they paying.
Again, it doesn't
not
mean
what we
like
collect.
we're not supportive. That's not what it means.
Right.
It's just what we're paying.
It's just saying that if you were, if you were put here and have never paid taxes a day in your life, and you bought a home in Stillwater for $300,000, you're going to cut a check, or you're going to pay in property taxes for our school $1,115. If you bought that exact same house in one of our comparison districts, you can see the dollar amount that you'd pay in school taxes. That's all. That's what it says.
Thank you.
Any others?
And then the last two slides, and the difference is these are presented merely to show, you can see the referendum market value tax base appreciation and the net tax capacity tax base appreciation, both at 9.5 and 969. And then enter the property value appreciation. This is saying, and it's easiest to point to the top line, if I had a $100,000 house, a market value $100,000 house a year ago, and nothing changed, as presented in this PowerPoint, I would have a $37.60 difference with nothing changed. The next slide is saying, what if, now we want to enter our property value appreciation at 7.2%. So my $100,000 house is now, I'm now paying, it's now estimated at 107,201. You can still see that there is still a reduction between the years, even if my home has appreciated in value. That's the intent of these slides. It's just giving you what if, because we always like to say if it's 300,000, it's 300,000, and this is just saying what if we held with every, the market value appreciation. And then what variables may cause increases or decreases? Again, change in market value, we don't control that. Also, we do not control the change in class rates, which we discussed as it applies to the net tax capacity and the history, market value credit. The one we do have is the voter-approved referendums that can cause that to happen, and then state adjustments, they do that too. So this, I haven't received any calls this year. That's not a surprise. Usually people don't call when they don't see it going up. But usually it's not something that the district can necessarily do about it. Their market value is changed or something's adjusted, and we don't have necessarily control over that. But these are some variables that can alter. So Mike, I will turn it over to you to.
At this point, legally, and because it's a good thing as well, we open it to public comment. So if anybody would like to come forward, identify themselves, and they can make a commentary known as far as our tax impact. That's the whole purpose of this. So if anybody would like to come forward, please do. Unlike our open forum, there is not a time limit. So.
A timer tonight?
There's no time limit.
Oh, I could talk for half an hour.
That's
right. I won't. I'm Kathy
You heard me
Saltzman.
refer to that
Thank
2-hour
you.
limitation.
I'm long-winded, but I'm Kathy Saltzman. I live in Woodbury. First of all, thank you for your service, Mr. Chair and members of the board. When I received my tax statement, I was pleasantly surprised because my taxes went down, and we have two different properties, both in Woodbury and in Stillwater, and so it was good to see those go down, even though it included the levy for the Brookview expansion, and I want to thank those who voted for that. Because taxes are down, that's a great thing. It's a good thing, but it's really not anything that you have done. It represents growth and investments in this district. But what comes with that growth? as you drive around, it could be just increasing property values, but it's also new homes, it's new apartments, it's new businesses, it's new construction. And so we capture that growth, and that's great, but with it comes needs. With those new homes are kids. Young kids, older kids, empty nesters, but it brings kids. And so what's important to note is that because of the way our funding formulas are set up, and I know it's very complicated, and thank you for the great explanation tonight. When you see that growth, there's a built-in way for a local government to capture that growth and have the resources to deal with the infrastructures and needs that come with that growth. And so this is a great example of where growth has generated additional tax revenue, and what do you do with that? And that's the question that you will be deciding in your next meeting, I believe. But how do you capture that? And so this district, over the past 25 years, when I moved here in 1994, I became very involved in our First Parent Legislative Network. I didn't know a lot about school funding, but I learned, and as a result of that, I ended up being a lobbyist on property tax reform for 10 years. And during that time, I saw this district ask, advocate, and beg to be included in what was then the alternative facilities piece. Because at the time, the way it was first set up, it was for much larger districts. And Stillwater was always on the edge of qualifying based on how many square feet of classroom space they had or number of students. And so over time, that levy and being able to be board approved has been something that this district has really wanted. And I have always supported that. It takes courage to vote for a tax increase. I know, because I've done it. And I will say there is a bridge about a mile from here because of a tax increase that I and others advocated for and then supported. I also know that right now there is a $1 billion state surplus. And in looking at the school district's legislative agenda, I noticed that that the district in 2020 is going to be very interested in increasing the basic general ed funding formula, further increasing the state's share of special education funding, and increasing funding to support mental health services. All of those have dollar signs on them. And there's a $1 billion surplus, and it appears that this district is very interested, or this board is very interested in capturing some of that additional revenue. So when I hear that this board is considering what it does with this new growth and additional potential tax revenue, do we use it to invest? And you know, if you don't do this, I may get additional tax relief to buy 3 cups of coffee. So are you going to use this to invest in a building that tonight I heard teachers speak about, and use that to address building needs? Or are you going to say, well, you know, it's not voter approved, I need to give this back to the voters. I need to give this additional $12, $15, $20 back to the voters. And my concern is that if you do that, it's a message to legislators that they should give the $1 billion back as well. So on one hand, you are asking for additional dollars for classrooms. You're asking legislators to fund additional mental health needs, to fund special ed. I would encourage you to do that. But then I also ask you to put yourself in that same place of you are elected officials, and you have the ability to use this, I will call surplus or revenue. I'm going to they're not exactly the same, but they are the same because they're tax dollars that can either go back to taxpayers or can be used to invest in very important needs. I want to say that in listening tonight to the teachers from Brookview, I really teared up because for the years that my children were in this district, there was no 834 school in my community, kids were sent outside of our district boundaries to a school run by a different school district. And kids were on different schedules, and kids really didn't feel like ponies. They really didn't feel like they were members of 834. They didn't, there just wasn't that kind of real connection. And yet, that community continued to vote for levies and bonds. So tonight, seeing teachers wearing their pony colors, it really felt like I'm really in the Stillwater district. I mean, that our kids are going to a Stillwater school, and they lost a school in this whole transition. But I want to tell you that when I hear that maybe they are not grateful, that this community is not grateful for this school, they are paying taxes. They are just as grateful for this school as the parents who went to Rutherford are, which again, Woodbury supported the investment in that school. So I will leave you with this. I really, really hope that when you have the opportunity to vote on the board-approved levy that would be able to fund the expansion of Brookview School, that you will take that very seriously and you will support it. Because taxpayers that I have talked to are so pleased. You are still giving property tax relief back. You did not use the Q-Comp levy, which I would have supported. But in this case, it's really, really an important need. There is so much division in this district, and I think that this would really show that you see that need, you have heard this, and in terms of tax impact, it is a wise choice. And I thank you for your time.
I was wondering, can we talk about the legal fees in this?
No.
No, that's
No.
not.
Okay, because,
Well, you can complain about them, I guess.
well, it seems like there should be more transparency in the board.
You can only talk about taxes.
I stand corrected.
Okay, well, the taxes pay for the legal fees. And so therefore, they should be done with thought and with the whole board consensus for the legal fees, because the taxes pay for them. And they're not going towards our children's education. They're not going for the classroom. And it seems like they're going for infighting that doesn't make sense.
And the next, pardon?
Oh, are we allowed to ask any questions or say anything at this point in the presentation?
I thought we did that already before we opened it up to public comment.
I don't think we did. We didn't
I'm
ask
just
any
wondering where
questions.
your music was.
What music? Can I just go back to the, I want to go back to the slide in the presentation that was the district comparison. And I think you were pretty clear that this isn't regarding the revenue that we receive. This is just when you compare a house that's worth 300,000 in our district to a house that's worth 300,000 in a different district. But would it be correct to kind of say loosely that that's just basically showing you, that's showing us a comparison of the total cost of our schools compared to the total value of the properties in our community? That right now we're operating our district really lean in a growing community. Would that kind of be accurate?
Not necessarily, because if you have a very commercial, industrial based district, that is actually going to help their residential taxpayers out. So it can't, because this is a component, and again, usually that it's the people, in our homes that are experiencing it. I don't think you can make a universal statement to say we're running lean and this is what they're doing. It just really, it depends on the makeup of their particular boundaried area for each school. And then, you know, the questions they've asked, what they're supporting, because it all varies. And I'll just throw out an example, and I'm not even going to say that it's accurate because I haven't done a lot of research on it. But let's say Matamidi. I don't view Matamidi as having a large commercial industrial base.
Yeah.
So my guess is that their taxpayers are probably footing more than, let's say, South Wash, because they quite honestly just don't have the non-residential picking up, helping with the tab, if you will. Now, does that mean that maybe Matamidi has done different things? They could have, you know, they have new buildings. I'm guessing they have a technology levy. There might be other things that we don't have, but it's just really hard to say unless you slice it 16 different ways to say why. The whole intent is to say, in the event that anybody were to come and say, I don't particularly support the dollar amount I'm paying in school taxes, I'm saying for many reasons. You know, we're the lowest in our comparison pretty significantly at this point. And it might be because we haven't implemented things. It might be because of our growth. It could be a host of factors. So I don't want to say it's just a thing.
Would it be more accurate for us to look at per pupil funding instead of looking at this?
Again, that's a component because you can go per pupil funding. You can go the referendum, the operating referendum formula. But then what have they, again, are they doing capital projects levy? Are they doing technology? Because that wouldn't show, you know, that wouldn't be a per pupil. Do they have new refreshed buildings? That wouldn't be per pupil. So again, that's a piece. I don't think you're going to get to where you want to get to with this slide, Sarah, because it really does nothing more than what is presented.
Okay. Other questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none, can we move along? And next we have Building Assets, Reducing Risk, the BAR program, NSI program, and Principal Bach. Welcome.
Thank you, Board Chair Potashik and members of the board, Superintendent Pontrelli. It's a privilege to be here tonight to talk with you about a pretty amazing opportunity that we have before us at Stillwater Area High School. As all of you know, for the last probably 2.5 years, we've been implementing the BAR program with fidelity specific to 9th grade. And we've delivered many kind of formal presentations to you about that. And I don't have a real formal presentation for you tonight other than just to kind of talk about this a little bit as an announcement and inform you. But we were approached recently by the BAR Center themselves and invited specifically to participate in a new endeavor that they are launching called the Network for School Improvement. And long story short, the BAR Center is looking to expand their footprint to more of a nationwide model. In order to do that, the BAR Center has been in consultation with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and been in the queue to receive funding from the Gates Foundation. And the BAR Center found out recently that they were awarded a very big sum of money from the Gates Foundation. And if you know anything about the Gates Foundation, you know that they do their homework. They want to invest their money wisely, and so they sit down and they demand to see some data, they demand to see results, and they want to know that the money that they're spending is going to go towards a good cause and be something that works. And they saw that with BAR. And they saw that in part because as the BAR Center was sitting down with the Gates Foundation to explain to them what their model looked like and how it worked for schools, Stillwater High School, one of our assistant principals, Matt Kraft, and myself were actually tapped to go and meet with the Gates Foundation representatives to kind of serve as a model and an example, due in large part to the amazing results that we've gotten at the high school, to be an example of how BAR works in schools. And what the Network for School Improvement is it's again a nationwide model that centers on 3 specific regions. We'd be a part of a cohort, if you will, in centering in the Midwest. And in the Midwest region, BAR is looking to involve 14 different schools. 9 of those schools would be schools that are implementing BAR for the very first time, so similar to us on our journey 3 years ago. And 5 of those schools would be what they refer to as anchor schools, so schools that have done this and have gotten some tried and true results and know that the model works for them in their schools. And that's something that's by invitation only, and they sat down and met with us and told us that they want Stillwater to be a part of that. And it's certainly something that's exciting for us because it gives us the opportunity to continue our own professional development, gives us an opportunity to serve as a model for many other schools that are trying this, which we already have, but now on a more formalized basis, and also more formally establishes the network between all of those schools. So part of what we'd be able to participate in is virtual meetings as well as in-person meetings, which are all funded through the Gates Foundation. That's the reason why they're the big backers, is gives us an opportunity to meet regularly with all of the other schools that are in the network to talk about systems that are working, things that we have done. It encourages experimentation, and the bottom line is all of that experimentation needs to revolve around the idea of building upon assets that our students bring every day. And so it's just it's a pretty amazing opportunity for us. I had the opportunity to attend our BAR big block meeting back last week and informed the team that that was something that was kind of in the hopper and in the works. And really, it's a testament to the work that our teachers have done day in and day out with our students. There's no two ways about it. I tell every school that comes to us to ask us questions about how BAR works, I tell them it's work. There's no two ways about it. This program doesn't work if you don't have amazing people who are willing to go the extra mile for the kids that are in our building. And our teachers have done outstanding work. Our coordinator, Katie Papungatoa, needs to be singled out. She is an amazing human being. If I could clone her and replicate her many times over, it'd be amazing what we could get done. And I threw some results in there, really, which is just to provide you with some context so that you're familiar a little bit more with some of the results that we've been able to see, which is the primary reason why we were approached. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them, but basically it's just to let you know that it's a very cool opportunity and unique opportunity.
That's wonderful news. I'm sure you've got a lot of teachers you'd like to clone.
I do.
Having
Dr.
said
Riley.
that, questions, Tina?
I do. I'm wondering if we could find out how much they are willing to, is it grant? And then is there any way that we can see what the contract is? I thought I heard something about it having to be signed by December or something.
Sure. As far as the dollar amount really is it's a budget that we have yet to determine. So again, the costs cover essentially the costs of what it costs us to be able to run BAR. So we have certain requirements that will take place. We have to provide training for our staff. So we have BAR people come in to do that. Depending on when we're able to schedule that, that might involve the use of substitutes, things like that. So there's costs that get incurred as you further your professional development around that model. And so what those costs end up being, those are the costs that Gates is willing to provide. The costs of travel or the costs of whatever the association is within the network, those are the costs that Gates will cover. So those are pieces that we will sit down and we will establish a budget with the leadership team that we put forward for the BAR program.
Okay. Cool. Is there a contract or no?
There is.
Okay.
Yes. Yep, there is.
Jen?
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to say this as a mother who has had one of my little cherubs recently experience a positive outcome of a BAR conversation, and I toured BAR myself. It was a few months back, so I can't say enough about the program. I've said it many times. I just wanted to draw, if anyone has their packet, page 30 shows the % of students failing one or more courses. Those numbers have gone down unbelievably. And I know that this is something to take pride in. This is a program that we're supporting here in this district, and the results are staring right at me on page 30 in that program. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And I would agree with you with Katie Papungatoa. She is a superstar, and I don't know when you're going to come back, and I've got dollars on the mind with the budget. And I guess for me, I'm a stickler on this. I say this a lot, but sustainability is key. sustainability. So how long do we have Katie Papangatoa? How can we support Katie and your work going forward?
That's a great question. I'm starting to think that she and I are going to be a package deal. So the minute that she goes somewhere, I'm probably going to be right behind her. So hopefully that's going to be for an awfully long time. And also I need to say too, I need to acknowledge in particular, Director Pelletier, Director Stivland served several years ago as part of our 9th grade transition team, where we sat down to talk about what kinds of things are we going to do as we onboard 9th grade and bring 9th graders into our building to become a comprehensive 9 through 12 building rather than a 10 through 12 building. And BAR was one of the biggest components that we talked about. We knew that we needed to do certain things. Our teachers talked about the systems that they wanted to maintain. It meshed perfectly with this program. And so being willing to have the courage to step up and say, yep, let's invest ourselves in this. This is a noble effort and worth our time and energy. It's certainly proved to be that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that, and going back to the chart that you referenced, what I remember learning from that whole process was that BAR is designed for 9th grade. It's designed for 9th grade students, but as you can see from your results, it has an impact on all of the grades, right?
And really, part of the exciting piece that that interests a lot of us as part of this program for the Network for School Improvement as an anchor school. One of the reasons that you're selected and invited to participate in one of the components of the program is you have to have an interest in extrapolating some of these concepts out building wide. And so we have actually piloted this year for the first time a smaller program in 10th grade, but it's a BAR program, so it's not through all 700 of our students in the 10th grade class, but it's a smaller cohort of students. It's a smaller group of teachers then that's tapped to learn some of those principles, and those teachers have reiterated the same thing. They found it to be energizing. They found it to be tapping into some of those core beliefs for why we went into education in the first place. And we even took some time last year to do some professional development with all of our staff around some of those concepts too. So as that continues to branch out, that will be a part of what we continue to explore.
And Ron, Mr. Bach, along those same lines, when the governor came and the lieutenant governor and the commissioner, did they come because they wanted to see BAR, or is that just something that was put on the itinerary when they came? Because I think most of the board was there and saw it and heard firsthand.
I think they came primarily because they recognized Stillwater as a leader in social emotional development. So again, I need to give a compliment to Superintendent Pontrelli, as that's been absolutely a part of her vision and her focus. BAR is one step in that direction, and it was a very tangible piece that we were able to show the governor, and certainly something that he and the lieutenant governor were very interested in, and the commissioner too. The commissioner, I believe, also had some familiarity with the program, and so again, it was a natural thing to show because it was right in alignment with what they were looking for.
Well, and I'm saying that's pretty good company, the governor. And
it was a great day. It was a great, and
as
again,
well as the Gates
it's indicative of a
Foundation.
feather in our cap, I do believe, and hats off to our staff.
Yeah. Sir?
So we just had a presentation on this, I don't know, a few months back maybe, and some of the teachers that were here talked about piloting or trying to adapt the concepts of BAR into the elementary level. Now, so what I'm wondering is, with this grant, will this be strictly high school, 9th grade?
This particular component is strictly high school.
Okay.
So this is germane to us right now and the efforts that we've done and what we'll do going forward. I think that BAR would certainly have an interest, yes, in expanding out beyond secondary.
Yeah, so, I mean, will be this resource for the rest of the district, though, with this additional funding and support and all of these assets to really make the program solid at the high school level. I would think that would also benefit with these groups that are the teachers that are trying to bring it down into the elementary level as well.
Certainly it's a resource. We've trained enough other schools at this point. We'd be happy to train some in-house teachers too.
Cool. That's great. It's very exciting.
Well, thank you for the wonderful news.
Absolutely.
And for the work you're
Thank you for your
doing.
support. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. I would like to remind the board that we have 30 minutes if we're going to meet our target. And the next item is the 2019-20 revised budget. And Kristen, that's yours too.
Thank you, even though I'm feeling obviously some pressure now.
But a good pressure.
It is good pressure. I'm okay with it. So I will move quickly. Please slow me down if you have a question. The 1920 revised budget. Chris, is that pulled up, ready to go? There we go. All right, the purpose of this presentation is to present an overview of the budget process, provide a summary of the funds and changes, review revenue sources and expenditure categories. The budget process, we start with the preliminary. For us this year, we adopted the preliminary budget in May, and it was based off of board-approved goals, approved budget adjustments, current law and regulation, and enrollment projections. And now the revised budget every year is adopted, and it's the middle of the school year is the way it states. We're looking at, usually we start the process after we get October 1 enrollment numbers, and we're usually coming to the board in December. And it's based off of all updated information we have, as stated, the October 1 enrollment and the 2019 legislative session. The session wasn't done until the end of May or June this year, and we had already adopted the preliminary. Typically, the legislative session information never gets into the preliminary because they never get done early to allow for us to do that. So it's based off of our assumptions of what we think is going to happen there. And one more thing I'd like to point out, there always is a revised budget update. This would only come if there is significant factors that would change the budget as we look to next year. If we know there's a large, our contract settlements, and they're going to significantly alter what we have projected, we'll come before you in the spring and have a refresh, because we always base next year's numbers off of the information that was last adopted. That hasn't happened in a few years, but just so you know, it is a possibility. General fund operating dollars, you can see our revenues and expenditures. Our revenues are greater than our expenditures. Revenue increases due to state aid, special education. We had one-time money for safe schools and pupil units. And then here it is, Mike, with the add of the grants. And this year, based on Governmental Accounting Standards Boards, or GASB 84, we were required to move some student activities that wasn't under board control into board control. And then expenditures increased, including long-term facility maintenance, safe schools. Again, it's reflective of the revenue we receive. That's a net grants and the addition of student activities. So that's why you see changes in those dollar amounts. Fund balance, the first number, 21.5 million. Please realize that is everything in its entirety in the general fund. The unassigned fund balance, we are projecting this to be $9.6 million. And it's, when looking at the calc of what percent, are we at greater than the board policy of 5%? We are assuming that that would be about 8.47%. You can see what the 5% is, how many million dollars the 5.67 is about, 5% for our budget. So you have met your unassigned fund balance goal based on our projections. Changes to food service, revenues are increasing due to price increases. That was a mandatory increase that came in the spring. The board acted on it. And then expenditures are also increasing because we have some fund balance that we're able to start replacing equipment that's needed in those areas. Still a very healthy fund balance. Community service, revenues are increasing because of Adventure Club enrollment and preschool enrollment. And expenditures are also Adventure Club and additional preschool staff, and then the pay increase that the board had approved at some point last spring. I am unfamiliar with what day it was, but that is also reflected. So the more kids you have, the more enrollment you have, the more staff you need. So that's how it counters itself. So our total operating funds, and operating is general food service, transportation, which is lumped into general, community ed, and capital. You can see even on this number with all sorts of categoricals and set-asides, our revenues are still higher than our expenditures, and our fund balance is just shy of $24 million in all of those categories for operating. Our non-operating funds, building construction, what has changed from the preliminary budget you just saw during the truth and taxation hearing is we have revenues of $75,000. Again, any revenues we're getting now is interest earnings. We've just assumed that we still have money sitting there. Expenditures, just over 3, and then a fund balance of 1.4. I want to say when we had talked about the 2015 bond, in the sheet you had, as everything plays out, we still anticipate that we'll have 800,000 plus. When it's all said and done and all expenditures are met, we will still have money available sitting there for the board to decide what they'd like to do with that. And then our debt service, revenues and expenditures, this is based off of levy. Not concerning that the expenditures are greater. Sometimes in levies, you have to levy 105% of your debt per year because they allow for people not paying their tax bill, and sometimes there's an offset to show that. So this is right in line where we should be. And so the sum of the non-operating funds. All right, this one's a little confusing. Again, as I mentioned, it's the GASB 84. And it's reflective in the draft version of the revised budget book. There was, with GASB 84, student activities needed to come under, that weren't, needed to come under board control. We don't have a lot of those that weren't. This isn't booster clubs. Everybody, all of those organizations have their own accounting system. This would be things like prom, Biza, drama, kind of your, where the kids had the money, raised the money, and they had a lot, and we didn't supervise how they spent it. The Accounting Standards Board is saying that that doesn't happen anymore. The board has to be watching how this is getting spent, but what happened with that declaration is they now have to live by our rules. Meaning you can't, let's say, give gifts to staff, and you can't, you might have had student council before that awarded certain prizes or something, and that's all gone now. They literally have to live by the rules that we have to live by. That's the unfortunate piece, but I certainly can understand, you want us watching it, and so that's the balance. With the scholarships money, what we had in our trust fund, and you'll see that in your budget book. And I do notice that the budget book is also online too, so people can take a look. It was essentially all scholarships. And the money just kind of flowed through, and every year it wasn't a whole lot of exposure to us. And again, regulations came in that said, if the school district has an administrative, I'm looking for the word, an administrative involvement, meaning we have any say in selecting a recipient, and administration doesn't just mean the people sitting at this table, it can be teachers too. If we have any involvement in deciding what student gets a scholarship, that goes under us. And anything that we literally are just a fiscal agent for, where there's a different committee and someone comes in, we house the money, and somebody comes in and that just says it's going to be, Mark Burns, we have no involvement. That goes into a different fund. So we had to split those out too. Because of the way I understand our process works in Stillwater, we give out a lot of money, but we always have people, our staff, that are involved, and so it's coming more, the vast majority of it is coming our way as opposed to staying independent. And then our overall, all funds, we're just shy of $140 million with just shy of $30 million in fund balance, or just over $28 million. This budget does not include any contractual increases in open contracts beyond steps and lanes. And again, as I mentioned, if you could get an updated revised budget, depending on the timing of large employee contract settlements, the budget may be revised in the spring of 2020. And we are, again, at the 8.47% unassigned fund balance. I would like to point out, it was discussed also during, kind of like why is there such a swing from what we were projecting in the preliminary for the unassigned to where we are today. And you essentially have 2 fiscal years that impact. First off, our 18-19 audit came in. And so we were basing a budget off of a budget. Now we know what our actual result was, and so we gained about 1.7 million to, to add to what would have been our preliminary and now our revised kind of to the bottom line fund balance. And then we have the additional special ed components and whatever that added this year. So it's almost like it multiplied, because it was, not to simplify it, but the easiest place is to say, if we had $2 million in special ed on, in 18-19, and we get another $2 million in 19-20, that's kind of like your $4 million spread of where we are today. So I will open it up to questions of the board. I realize that was very fast. So
I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question that I'm
Okay.
not going to ask you to answer now, but to give us a follow-up collectively, if you would. And that is going back to page 66, and it was non-operating funds. I think it was building construction. And you said that there was an additional 1.4 million in there that could be used for other purposes.
no, what I said was that was how we anticipate the fund balance at the end of the year ending. What I believe is we'll have over 800,000 when it's all said and done, because we still have playgrounds out there
Yep.
that aren't even in the hopper to be completed for the 19-20 school year. So there's still going to be little bits of tails. That's not the 1.4, isn't it? We have to subtract some playgrounds and whatever to give us $900,000 that will remain.
And all I want to know is flexibility and where it could be used or how it could be used.
So.
And you don't have to even do that
it's easy.
now.
This one's an easy one,
I'm just
and I'm
trying to
pushing.
meet that 20 minutes.
You
Go.
can give it back to the taxpayers. We can issue an amendment, an addendum, a request to the Department of Education to change how that money is used. Those are your two options. You would have the choice to vet out how you would like that to be used. It would not be able to be used for operation, but certainly some sort of capital project, we could make some sort of plea, especially if it was something that had involved the original debt of 2015, to say, we want to invest more money into the high school or whatever, that we could use that.
Okay, thank you.
Upon their approval.
Shelley?
Thank you. I have two questions. So first, just so that we all have the same understanding, our general operating fund, if we want to keep our budget balanced, we don't have $4 million to spend because our fund balance is higher than we expected, correct? When you look at our budget, we're about 500,000.
It is the difference between, if you want to maintain your 5%, it is, you need the 5.4, and I'm trying to find the slide. Don, can you possibly pull up the presentation? Thank you.
Page 62, maybe?
Yeah, we'll get there.
I'm looking at 61 in the general fund operating.
So if you look at, 9.6 million is, let's just say it's $3 million, just for the sake, maybe, $3.3 million. That's what is sitting in the fund balance. That's the differential between what the board has approved and what is there. What you're not, when we talk about a balanced budget, we're comparing revenue to expenditures on an annual basis. And so, I know you guys have heard me ad nauseum for years say the revenues and expenditures you want balanced, and try to keep your fund balance to reduce the ebb and flow, if you will, right? Because you don't know what's coming, you don't know if we'll get what we want. It's one-time money. So either use it for one-time expenses or plan accordingly that if you do start using it, you have a way to replace it.
Right. So we could, in theory, probably spend about, if we wanted to reduce our cuts or something else, there's 500,000, not 3 million. If we wanted to do continuing, if we wanted to put something back in the budget in our cuts. Is my question making sense?
I'm not understanding the dollar amount, but I understand your question.
So go to 61, the slide right before that. That's what I'm looking at. That right now our operating revenues are about 500,000 more than our operating expenditures.
Yes.
So that's the amount
that you would still be at a balanced budget.
We could, right. Okay. Thank you.
Jen?
Kind of an add-on to that, to the budget cuts, and I just wanted to throw this out there. So could you, Kristen, clarify, we cut, was it up to 4 FTE through attrition of our custodial staff, and I remember that was a really, really tough.
It was, and yes, we did.
And pretty painful cut, and I think that's one that I just wanted to, and they were, again, that was attrition, and that came out of the general fund?
It did.
Okay.
It did. Yeah.
So that, yeah, I'd like to kind of advocate for maybe.
One thing, and for clarity, because I actually, Shelley, I apologize, I answered you incorrectly.
Okay.
Back to that slide, Don. When you're looking at that, that is our operating fund in its entirety, which means, or our general fund in its entirety, which means it includes operating capital, it includes long-term facility maintenance. Those are reserved categories. And so I don't want to say, well, this is because we have, reserve accounts that are coming into fruition. So when you take those, the operating capital account off and you take the long-term facility maintenance account off, our adjusted revenue is 105,360. Our adjusted expenditures are 101,962. So when you kind of take those reserved categoricals out of the mix, it's closer to the 3.3. So my apologies, I answered you incorrectly the first time.
Thank you.
So, sorry, so just back to mine, so the 4 FTEs, Kristen, that was just to close it out, that was around 100K, so if we were to just replace that, that would be the dollar amount we'd be looking
Well,
at.
and again, not knowing exactly how many we were reducing, I want to say an average custodian is closer to 70. So if we were, it was like, I think it was a timing thing, so that would be more like, if we were to hold to the dollar amount, it would be closer to 1.5 FTE. If we were to go to, the 4, then we're probably looking at $250,000 in add backs. I don't know that I'm not certain that we've entirely reduced the full 4. That's why it was up to 4. I think we're getting there.
Okay. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Others? Seeing none?
Wait, one more thing, Mike. What I'd like to point out too is, just remember when we're looking at all of these dollar amounts, the important caveat is on the last slide, on the summary slide, that this doesn't include any contract settlements.
That's an important one.
That's a big thing to look at, that is not built into the numbers that we're looking at today.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any others? Seeing none, we're going to go to Director Pearson, who's going to talk about the expenditure approval form.
All right, thank you. In your packet, and I'm just trying to find the page number, 127. What you have in front of you, we've seen off and on different variations of since, I don't know when we started. So this was originally brought to the Finance Working Group just so we had a little bit better consistency in how we look at expenditures that come to us that are over $50,000. And I think administration was very willing to put something into place to allow that for us, but as we went along, there were just more and more questions and what does this mean and how should it be? And so I had said, let's bring it to the full board so that we can all talk about it and then we can have kind of a common understanding of what it is. So I was asked at a board chair superintendent meeting to meet with, for me as chair of personnel and Liz as chair of finance, and then Tina as the one who originally brought the form to me and just kind of work through some of the things that had come forth. There was I think it was a potential policy that was brought to the policy committee, which ended up being more of a procedural thing. So Liz and Tina and I met and we just talked through the different items and what we were really looking for. And I think overall, what board members are hoping for is just that we always, for me, I always ask, is this long-term facilities maintenance? This kind of takes some of that out and it's part of the form. So it gives clarity, it gives consistency. We're always getting the same questions answered. Not that we won't have other questions, but just to have a little bit of that. So if you just look through the form, you'll see that this is for when lease purchase or contract for goods or services exceeds $50,000. We added the next line because the question was brought to us, does this mean every staff add needs to come for the pre-approval? But for example, we have a class or a kindergarten that's gone over the board approved range. And so that's not the type of thing I think that was meant to have this brought
beforehand, because that then slows down the process of being able to get a teacher in that classroom. So when it is that case, that it's due to student need or student count, we'll still get the form, but it'll be part of the HR report when that position is hired, or part of the consent agenda when that position is hired. And then the rest is really self-explanatory. We talked about, we put in here anticipated budget areas, because as Kristen has said before, they always have an idea of where the money will come from, but sometimes when you get to the end of the budget cycle, there's, as we do with our own budget, sometimes we spend differently in different areas, and so they might make some adjustments. With that, it will help us know whether this is a one-time ask or will be funded indefinitely, and then whether there's an offsetting revenue source. So is it a grant? Have we received a grant for this? Or if it's just coming out of the general fund. And then finally is next steps. So for example, with the ELA, the literacy, part of that could be, here's what the follow-up will be to the board. We'll see how the scores do. We'll continue monitoring that. Here's when we can expect to have it back to the board. So with that, any questions or comments from others?
Mark?
My understanding when this, the idea of the form first came on was to look at expenses that were outside of the approved budget. It sounds like and looks like that's not currently what we're looking at. Okay. Well, that was my understanding, but it looks like now it's for any expense over 50,000. Is that correct?
Well, besides the ones that I think there's a list of utilities and things like that wouldn't come to us. That's like regularly occurring.
Okay, so that was one of my questions, is that they're going to be, I had written down utilities. So should that be reflected on the form?
I was wondering I don't know how we reflect that, because I know that there's a working list and we just added something was just added to the list that was a regularly occurring.
The referees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that list was for where we can make payment without waiting for the board for disbursement. That was the intent of that. What this is doing, so that was disbursement. This is happening before we ever incur it, but there is some, obviously, we're going to spend. I mean, for example, at some point this year, I'll be coming to you with a new, probably 4-year transportation contract. You'll see that once. I mean, because you've approved the contract in its entirety, no different than when Director Perry brings you things for technology. It's just more of an awareness. Now, again, the indirect costs that go with the operation, utilities, different, unless we have an option to switch providers, that those sorts of things wouldn't be coming in front of you. Or like property and liability. I mean, those are inherent things. We need to be insured. And so unless we're moving in a different direction with that, there is some that are just going to be.
So my question then is, do we need to reflect that type of understanding that we have on the form, so that if this is going to be a form that goes on for years, beyond this board, we forget what our understanding was tonight. We want to make sure that we have clarity, that there's not a misunderstanding. You should have used it, or we didn't expect to be using it. And my follow-up on that is, if it says that the form is to be completed any time a purchase lease contract exceeds 50,000, and the only time that it would go into consent if it is a staffing increase due to student need or count, what about just regular staffing at when we're hiring our teachers at the beginning of the summertime or whenever that happens, springtime? Do each one of those teachers need to be on there?
No. And I think going back, when this was originally brought forth, it was if it's a new area, a new position that's been created, but that would really slow down the hiring and eliminate a lot of competitiveness that we have to have.
Absolutely.
Right. I don't know if there's a better way. I think the only time staffing would come to us is if it's a newly created position. Right. So if there's a new program or something that they're creating a new position. This, like adding because there's more kids in the kindergarten class, isn't a newly created position. That's simply due to student need or count. So I think that's really the only time staffing would come to us.
Or if you have a special needs situation where IEPs change, a kid moves in the district, something happens where you need to be in compliance with that as well. I would assume that would fall under the consent.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even those actually show up on the HR report anyway.
Well, and that gets just one thing that we talked about. Part of it, what we're hearing, I think, is there a way to? It's not only about getting what are we budgeting for if it's new positions, but is there a way to have an accounting for once the program's in place? And one thing that we looked at, and actually that's been happening, and I don't know, Shelley, if you were able to share that, and I made copies of just one example, which is from our Skyward reporting. If we look at developmental designs, I can have Patty in our department pull a sheet out of Skyward that would tell you, here's the staffing, or here are the materials associated with that, here is the professional development associated with it, here's miscellaneous associated with that total design, because what we've switched to in the last year is breaking down items for that very reason, so that it's much easier when the question comes up of, what's this program cost from a programming standpoint? What's this costing? Our L&I department, so anything under that learning side, is starting to code everything, or has been coding everything specific to line item pieces. So, for example, anything related to the elementary literacy curriculum, we could have Patty pull elementary literacy curriculum, and we could have a running sheet at real time tomorrow. Here's what to this point's been expended on it. So we will have that, and I just want to make sure the board is aware that we're set up to do that.
I really haven't been involved in any conversations, even though I developed this whole thing from the get-go, so this is a little bit frustrating for me. My initial intent with this was when I came to these meetings and there was an ask, it didn't elongate or make the procedure super long. I want to know, basically, when you come to the board and on here it says $50,000, I would just leave that the board approved amount, so you don't have to worry every time, or if that may change in the future or not. But it's the intent for the ask, which is being done on some of the forms already. The overall cost of the program, because, for instance, ELA is, you're doing some now and there'll be some later, or other programs or things we do. What is the overall package? Is there indirect costs? What other programs are affected? And like I said before, it was if you're looking at coaches or instructional coaches or whatever, if you hire those, where are those going to be affected? For me, how is it going to be sustainable, and those simple things. And I think if we just, by starting out a request with those questions answered in the forefront, I think with that pattern on everything going forward, you have a much bigger understanding of everything is put against the same, and you probably do this already, and so you probably have this already, but everything is put against the same variables and the same scrutiny before you go ahead and start a new program. I don't know.
Okay, so Shelley.
Can I just ask, because we did meet and I tried to reflect everything that was important
This
to you.
doesn't quite look, I don't know.
I mean, I took the whole list, I matched everything, so I guess I don't know what else is, or if the whole, I guess I don't know, because my intent in meeting with you and Liz was to really try to capture everything that was important to you, and I took all of these and I matched them up with what's here. So I guess I don't know what next steps to do then.
I think there was a question.
I think Jen has one.
Jen?
Thanks, Mark. I guess I'm just wondering, is this for the boards? Is this for the board, or is this for staff? What did staff do before? Did staff weigh in on this form? I mean, because who houses the form? I guess, did you work together on the form? And then and then I have a quick secondary question.
The form isn't coming from us. We're trying to navigate what was asked to put into the form. If you're asking historically, what happens is historically when programs come to the board, they're presented as reports and then action items to include expenses and costs that go with them. An example is the current ELA program that's up there. There are budgeted pieces. So that's how we track it. And then as we expend those pieces, like I said, it's tracked in Skyward in the accounting system by line item.
Okay, so can I just ask a secondary? So if I look at this, and my example might be the bar program, and I'm looking at, is this a one-time expenditure? Yes, once implemented, there will be no ongoing costs. No, it will need to be funded indefinitely. No, it will need to be funded for a number of years. I guess my concern is that isn't entirely accurate in the bar situation. I know that the funding is going to be a little bit staggered, or maybe it's going to go back and forth, and we really don't know where the funding, this may come up 5 years from now, or 4 years, or 7 years, and we don't really know. So I guess I'm trying to understand, what is the purpose of this? How does it help? Who does it help?
Yeah, and I think Shelley wants to respond.
Yeah, I think from my understanding, it helps us because it's a consistent form. So it helps us to see all the questions that I would normally ask would already be answered in here. And then I think as far as your point about bar and, will it change in 4 years? I think that's part of the measurement and follow-up, is that this doesn't have to be like it's set in stone like this forever, but it helps us understand, where is the ask coming from? Where is it going to land? Is this just in this year's budget, or are we asking for in perpetuity, and to see if it's sustainable? So I think that's the purpose. I think administration's been really good about being willing to try it and see how it goes. But I think really it's just for consistency and for our oversight, to know that we've done our due diligence and understanding where areas are going to.
We have a couple other comments. Keep in mind,
I'll be
we're
quick.
past
I'll be
8.
quick. I can't remember if it first came up in policy or finance, because I'm on both of them, but I know that the comment was, this looks like I think Kathy said, this looks like a form we used to have. And I think we actually found the old form, and it was 2 pages. And so this is a condensed version of that, but it did used to happen. So I think we tried to sort of merge both forms together just to get the same information and to provide, one of the things that you were saying was important is this a sustainable program?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other?
I think there's a
Kathy?
question down there.
Just to clarify, so yes, I brought the form that was originally in place that looked a lot like this. The form that we were working from, though, was the form that was used during the budget development process, so the prior year, when people wanted to add things for the upcoming budget. So it was very similar in what was asked, but it was done a one-time to set the budget, not every expense that went through. So we've been trying to adapt it to figure out how to make it work the way you want it to work.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I just say that I would like this to come in the packet, just ahead of the ask, not just for consistency with communication, not in superintendent reports or other means. I think if it's always there, then it follows through with the ask.
I would agree with that. If we're gonna do it, I would agree with that.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think this has been a good conversation. I feel like one of the concerns, or one of the questions that I've sort of been puzzling with for a while, that I think this form will answer, is every year we give authority to the finance director and the superintendent to make financial decisions on behalf of the district up to the amount of $50,000. And when it's beyond that amount, it was never really clear what was different, because typically we would get we would see the expenses in the disbursement report, And, perhaps we would get a report in an action item on a big picture thing. But we weren't always getting that. So I think we're trying to look for some consistency and a better form of communication between administration and the board and the community. And I feel like this is a really amazingly simplified way of looking at it. It gives us a starting point to have conversation. And I think if we can build some consistency in using it, and like you said, I think having it in the packet is a really good idea. Let's keep it the same. Let's use it the same. Anytime there's an expense over $50,000, it's part of an ongoing expense that we're already aware of. I love it, and I appreciate all the work that has gone into it.
Thank you. Can we move on to policy? Okay.
Can I say one more thing? And it's really brief. But could I ask for anybody that has anything that they may want to add or contribute to this? Can you send it to Shelley?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Let's go to first reading, 209, Code of Conduct, Policy Working Group. Or Kathy?
I'm sorry to take you back. I guess if I can just ask, here's the struggle that we've been having. Procedurally, what is it that you want us to be doing? Because I'm not sure that I'm clear what I'm supposed to bring, when I'm supposed to bring it. Is it supposed to go on the consent? Is it supposed to go on an action? That's what we've been struggling with. We've been able to figure out the form, but we don't know what the process is. So I guess that's what I'd ask the board to clarify is, we want to do what you want, we just don't really know what that is.
Want to read our minds.
And if I could just add one thing I was going to say earlier and I forgot to, and I'm glad you mentioned that, is do we want to codify? Once we get that clarified, do we want to get it in policy so that there are some pieces laid out, so that we just have that clarity? So once we get it all figured out exactly how we want it to go, maybe we add some stuff to the
Well, let me
policy.
turn to the two groups, Shelley and Sarah head those two groups. Are you comfortable that you got enough to go to the next step?
Well, I would want feedback. I mean, I think we've been talking about it a lot in board chair superintendent, so I don't think it's getting everywhere. Clearly not to the whole board and not to all of administration. We've talked about, like, with staffing to student need, that's just in the consent agenda. I think it just depends, if it's a capital expenditure, often that can be just in the consent agenda. But sometimes it's hard to know whether it's a report and an action item. So
we may have to develop a procedure that goes along with the form.
Correct. Yep.
So that it's clear.
Agreed.
Right.
Can I just say, I have a friend who's on the school board in Duluth, and I asked him about how they handle their expenditures that are over a certain amount. Actually, their threshold is $25,000. So any item that is over $25,000, at least according to this conversation I had with him, they have it as an action item. And I said, don't you have like a ton of action items then? And he said, we usually go through them pretty quickly. But the point is that people in the community wanted to know when there was a bigger expense, and according to them, that was defined as $25,000 or more, they wanted to bring it forward at the board table. And it seemed pretty straightforward. So it was just one way of thinking about it.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kathy, because it was in my head that I understand now, I think, what the form is for, but what is our directive to staff? And if we don't have clarity on that, we need to give you clarity.
Nothing yet.
We'll get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good conversation.
Thank you.
Yep.
So turning to the Policy Working Group and the Code of Conduct.
Okay, so
Keeping the clock in mind.
the clock and time in mind. The Policy Working Group has been taking a close look at the Policy 209, which is a Code of Conduct policy. Part of the conversation has arisen because of some of the legal conversations that we were referring to earlier. Part of it is because we have old policies which have not been replaced yet. And as we're going back and reviewing them, we're seeing some pieces that we don't want to lose as we go forward with the process of changing over to a more of a MSBA model policy format. And so as part of that process, as some of you may remember, last year, we really transformed Policy 209, the Code of Conduct, and streamlined it quite a bit. But at this time, what we are recommending is that we add two items to this policy, and it's at the very end of the list. Number 16, that board members shall include the superintendent and board chair in requests for reports and information. This one is just simply trying to streamline, efficiencies and making sure that everyone's on the same page. And then 17 is board members will notify the board chair prior to contacting district legal counsel. And that we have worked on that language for quite some time, and really I want to honor the team and the administration and the time that has been put into this extensive consideration. We feel that by having board members have the opportunity to reach out to legal counsel if they have questions, it will make us individually stronger as board members. But to be able to be required to go through the board chair would then have the sort of responsibility of making sure that there isn't duplication, or that if a whole bunch of board members have the same concerns, maybe we can streamline things and have one phone call with a question and an answer, and that can be shared with everyone. So, or maybe we, find that we need to go to a work session, or, anyway, it would be putting the responsibility on the board chair to manage the time and the cost of getting legal counsel. So before we get into too much conversation, I would just like to say this is the first reading. We will have a second reading, and then we'll have a third time as an action item, and that will obviously that will happen in January. We will not be having the second reading at our next meeting on the 19th. And so if there is some discussion today, I think that would be great. But we will have opportunities to discuss further. And if anybody wants to give some feedback via email, whether that be here on the board or out there in the community, I would welcome that.
Okay, Mark?
So, and I appreciate that I think that is what we're looking for here. The three of us didn't agree on the last one, number 17. I think the three of us agreed on 16, but 17, we had a lot of discussion about hours and hours. So I'm going to try to boil this down very short and try to appreciate the time for everyone. But what we set out to try to do is look at the BGP, the SBR and SL policies that are, if you call them, our old policies, but as Sarah mentioned, we've never actually, neither our board nor a previous board has ever actually formally revoked those old policies. So they're out there. They're policies that are still there. And I just wanted to read very quickly there are three policies that kind of relate to this number 17 that's shown on 209. We went through, like I say, there are probably hundreds of provisions within those BGP, SBR, and SL policies that we went through. Are there any that we really feel like we need to bring forth into our new policies? And then the idea would be that we would indeed revoke those old, if you will, policies. So in going through, we tried to boil them down, but the ones that were the source of our conversation are BGP section, BGP 3.0, and then sections 6.8 and 6.9. And I believe I spoke with Sherry. They're not currently, these policies, you can't find them currently on the website, but I think Sherry's going to try to put them on maybe early part of next week. And that will give the board members and public an opportunity to go through them and then comment, because I think we're looking for board member input, we're looking for public input, and then we as a policy working group can go back through and work on it and come back for a second reading of this.
Which happens in January.
In January. We will not be coming back with a second reading here next week. But I wanted to, just for the purpose for tonight, the sections that have to do with this number 17 that come from our old BGP, and starting with BGP 3.0, section 6.8. that says, individual board members shall not contact board legal counsel regarding superintendent performance evaluation without approval of the full board. That's 6.8. 6.9 says legal matters other than superintendent performance evaluation shall be forwarded to the superintendent to investigate as necessary. And then the final one is on BGP 4.0, section 1.5. That one says, as a member of my local board of education, I shall, this section 1.5, again, BGP 4.0 1.5, be personally liable for expenses incurred without prior board approval, especially as they relate to consultant, vendor, and/or legal expenses. So these are our policies that are there, and we're working on. We've been working on how can we incorporate those concepts in a way. Do we want to shift to a model? Sarah mentioned, are there benefits of a model in which there is direct conversation between board members and legal counsel? But there is a conflict there too. Should we instead have it kind of the previous model, where it's really left to the board chair to make that communication? So those are the discussions that we've had. In my opinion, the reason why we've had our discussions, I see challenges with moving to a new model in which we have direct contact between board members and our legal counsel. I think one of the challenges we're hearing when we're in the disbursement register, where we have potentially a duplicity of costs, where you have board member A who has a question, they get an answer. Board member B has a question, they get an answer on potentially very similar questions. But there's no crosstalk, there's no communication across the board as to what's happening, what is the information. And so I see that as a problem. The second problem, I think, is almost more important than even the potential duplicity of cost, which is if board member A has some information, board member B has similar information, but maybe interprets it differently, sometimes at our board table, we're not being clear, and we're saying there's information that isn't necessarily accurate. So those are the types of topics that we've had in our discussions that I would like to have board members weigh in on the pros and cons of changing our model from what the old policy is, as well as community members to do the same. And then I think we can have a discussion from there.
Good questions. Anybody else?
Just Mark, would you mind, what was the superintendent, could you reread the superintendent and then just, if you could just, and then Sherry, where's Sherry? Sherry here? Oh, there she is. Sherry, would you mind, and then you said you were going to send it to the BGPs, to the board, so we have that, because
So I'm going to post them back on the website.
Okay.
They were removed, so next week I'll get all those put back on the website for your review.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. And then, so just, I really am, so 3.0, section 6.8, BGP, that one had to do with the superintendent component, is that right? Eva, or can you read that again for me, Mark? And then what was the 4.0, section 1.5 again?
Okay, so the BGP 3.0, section 6.8 says individual board members shall not contact board legal counsel regarding superintendent performance evaluation without approval of the full board. 6.9 is the other one. Legal matters other than superintendent performance evaluation shall be forwarded to the superintendent to investigate as necessary. And then the other section is that BGP 4.0, section 1.5, where it says, as a member of my local board of education, I shall be personally liable for expenses incurred without prior board approval, especially as they relate to consultant, vendor, and/or legal expenses. So again, these are policies that are there. Do we want to shift to a different policy? Those are the questions that I think we need to discuss.
Shelley?
Is this laid out at all in MSBA policies?
No.
They don't speak to it at all?
That's correct, right.
Well, and I think it came around because legally, as board members, we do have a right to contact legal. I understand that we don't want to have a duplication of phone calls, which is why we had written in there to notify the chair, not to get the chair's permission, but to notify. And I know it's my preaching to the choir here. We've talked about this literally for hours. But that the way our old policy was written, it seemed to say that we didn't have the right to call legal when we do have the right to call legal. And so that's what necessitated the new policy.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and policy, I agree, and I don't want to spend a lot of time because we're already well past, but the policy, while we have the right to do something, we can create policy that restricts those rights. Yes. And that's the question that we have. Do we want to?
Right.
I have many concerns with 17 the way it's written. So I agree that this probably needs a much longer discussion. So
could you send an email?
I'll send an email.
That would be really helpful because then we can have it in front of us.
Yeah, and I would like the public too to really pay attention to look at online, and it'd be nice to hear input as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate the way that 17 is laid out because that's my practice. Anytime I've ever had the need, I always go through board chair to make sure there isn't duplicity or maybe there isn't another answer.
And could I just say, and one of my issues was the policy that we had, the BGP, wasn't being abided by. People weren't getting permission of the full board to call legal anyway. So if we weren't even paying attention to that policy, why have it?
And I would just like to also say, as we move forward with more discussions on this, keep in mind the notion of conversations that go on, whether it's one-offs, two-offs, three-offs, that the rest of the board, we are a board, we're not individual, and and our attorney is not our personal attorney.
Right.
It's the board attorney. So when
that
we
goes
have
for
one-offs and
everybody at
two-offs
this
and
table.
three-offs, and we have conference calls and this and that the rest of the board isn't purview to, that's a problem.
And that's for everybody at the table.
Yep. And that's why I think
that's why 17 is weak.
Well, it's important to have something that we all can, not just our board, but this is hopefully for future boards too, right? To pay attention to. And I think, again, the biggest concern that I've had that we've talked about is I want to make sure that when there is information that is given to us as board members from legal counsel, that is information that is, and really is, it's owned by the taxpayers, but it's that we have a common understanding of the information. Because if we don't have a common understanding of our legal counsel, what their advice is, that can really lead to problems.
I agree.
Yep.
Shelley?
Sorry, just the last thing. Have you contacted MSBA to see what they would recommend? If you could let them know that we're struggling with this policy and.
Yeah. The other thing I'd share though.
I have not, but I can.
Is that there have been situations that have come up where MSBA and our legal counsel are not on the same page.
Correct.
And MSBA, in some cases, has not been accurate in terms of the law, according to our attorney.
And we
we're
have
called
contacted
on
our
it
attorney.
and
So could we
corrected.
get both of those? Could we get the feedback from both of those when
Yes.
that'd be great.
Yes. Should we move on?
Please.
I appreciate the conversation. So the other one
825.
we're bringing forward policy number 521. It is student disability non-discrimination. This will be replacing, we will revoke policy number R1.3.3 and replace it with this one, 521. And we have this policy is pretty much, we started out with MSBA, we combined it with our current district policies. We've reviewed it carefully. It's not very long, so it's pretty straightforward. Anybody has any questions or concerns or suggestions, feel free to email any one of us on the policy working group.
Okay. We are done with reports. Let's move on to action items. And those three all belong to policy as well.
Okay, so we'll jump right in, and I just want to say if either of the board policy working group members want to jump in, if I forget something, if you want to add something, please feel free. These next three policies are for action items. We are voting to approve them. The first one is the public data requests, policy number 722. This is a mandatory policy. We're required to have it. Actually, up until this time, we have not had one. So we will now be in compliance once this gets approved. We spent a lot of time working on this one. We've made quite a few adjustments. The original one that was from MSBA, I think, was kind of a lot of duplication, so we cleaned it up a little bit. We customized it to our district and to our the procedures that we have been following. I should say we haven't had an official policy in place, but we've had a procedure in place that we've been following carefully. So we're taking some of those pieces of the procedure and putting them actually into the policy at this time.
Can I just point out one thing on this one? I would just like to point out that the definitions which show on page 2, well, it's not really page 2, of the second part of this policy look like they're crossed out, but they're just moved to the end. So we didn't do away with the definitions, we just moved them to the end.
That's a good point.
Okay, Shelley?
This is just super minor, and I'm sorry I didn't notice it before. On page 138, under public data, I think the 2 and 3 should be C and D moved over in the outline.
So
which page, Shelley? I'm sorry.
138 at the top. So number 1 says the school district will charge for copies provided as follows, and I just think the 2 and 3 need to be under that instead of
formatting.
Yeah.
So let's see, wait. It says number 1 is the school district will charge for copies as follows, and then A and B, and then 1 and 2 explain the procedure for how copies are being
not those
charged.
1 and down to the 2 and 3
below.
And then 2
should be
is
C and D.
2 is so this is all under category 5, which is titled costs. If you go up to page 137, this is category costs. So under costs for A, it says public data. The costs for retrieving public data fall under 3. There are 3 rules. 1 is the school district will charge for copies provided as follows, and it explains. 2 is all charges must be paid for in cash in advance of receiving the copies. And 3 is the requester will not be charged for time spent separating public from non-public data. Those are 3 rules relating to the costs of public data.
Okay, I apologize.
So it is actually correct.
I apologize.
Good news.
It's okay.
Okay, anything else on data request policy 722? Seeing none, could I have a motion?
So moved.
Liz moved. Is there a second? Jennifer seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. Let's go to policy 401, equal opportunity employment, policy working group.
Okay, and again, this new policy 401 is following the MSBA format for numbering. We will be revoking and replacing policies SR 1.9 and R 1.3.1. This new policy will replace both of those policies. And just so you know, we did go back and refer both of those policies. They're pretty much completely folded into this one. They were very similar. So again, kind of straightforward, pretty short. Required by law. It's mandated that we have this policy. It's a good one to have, equal opportunity employment. And so if there's no further discussion or questions, I would like to move that we approve the equal opportunity employment policy number 401.
I'll second.
Second, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand, please.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. We are on to the final policy being proposed for action tonight, policy 402, disability non-discrimination.
Again, this is policy 402. It is going to be, when we approve this, we will be revoking and replacing policy R 1.3.1 and SR 1.9. And again, this is a mandatory policy that we are updating. Just a couple of formatting changes here, not a lot of differences. So if there are any comments or questions, I would like to move that we approve policy number 402, disability
It's
non-discrimination.
been moved by Sarah and seconded by Liz. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand, please.
Aye.
Again, it passes unanimously. What I would like to do at this point, our goal was to be done at 8, it's 8:30. I would, with your blessing, I wouldn't say permission, with your blessing, I'd like to adjourn at this point. All those in favor?
Can I just say one thing before we adjourn?
Oh,
I'm sorry. I wanted to say in my board report that I heard that our school bus drivers collected over $1,000 to give in donation to Community Thread, and I just want to say that's amazing and thank you. So good for them.
All right, we are adjourned.
I'll forgive you for that one.
Sorry.